Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Thank you for joining me today. In this video, we're going to discuss the current events with Russia, Ukraine, and the lead up to World War III. This is not inevitable, and this video does definitely not make me happy to speak about, but there's a lot of noise in internet land and going around. And I think that we need to stop, take a step back, look at how we got here, look at the wise people from the past, the lessons from history, and allow that history to inform us in our actions moving forward. I do believe that we are sitting on the precipice of World War III. Some people have already said that it's begun. I think there is reason to believe that that is correct. I don't think, though, that catastrophe internationally and globally is inevitable. I think there's a lot that we can do, particularly in prayer, but we're not there yet. However, because of the situation and because of the tensions and because split-second decisions by fallible people with egos involved and positions of power, split-second decisions can have wide and far-reaching impacts for millions and hundreds of millions of people, as it has been the case throughout history. We got here today in the situation we're at because of World War I and because of hundreds of years of moves prior to that. But rather than belabor the issue of Eastern Europe and its very, very thick and long history of being not only entangled within alliances, but also as a buffer zone between Europe and between Russia, I think we need to evaluate how we got here. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of people making, perhaps you've seen this as well, one of the mistakes that I see people in the West making is to put upon the Russian government the same sense of individual rights, like taking it for granted that Russia as a civilization, the Russian civilization, and definitely the Russian government reflective thereof, they have not been through the Enlightenment. And so you can't expect their governments to have the same consideration, definitely for individual rights, but also to have the same worldview. The Russian people do not have the same worldview as Western Europe. That is a fundamental truth. I'm not speaking against individuals because I have lots of friends and definitely lots of students who have come from this part of the world who are obviously the exception, but it is critical to understand something. Russian civilization has not been through the Enlightenment. It went from, in the 1800s, a large and expansive landmass, sparsely populated, comprised of large numbers of illiterate peasants, and in the span of 20 years went through violent revolutions, ultimately culminating in communism and in genocidal communism. The history of Western Europe with the Reformation, the Magna Carta, individual rights, separation of powers, governments representative of the people. That revolution in worldview and outlook never happened in Russia, has not happened in Russia. Peter the Great doesn't count, and 1991 forward is a very, very short blip in the span of history. So it is illogical and unreasonable for us to expect that Russian government officials are going to somehow check themselves and act like us simply because we want them to. That is naivete. That is pathological optimism. World War I moving forward. The border regions of Eastern Europe, have always been a buffer for Western Europe, for Western civilization against Russia. And so this was bound to happen, particularly when you evaluate World War I, the borders and the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Habsburgs. There's a lot that looks very similar now, and I think that it is wise for us to look back on this. The situations that led up to World War I are very, very similar. The patterns are very, very similar to where we're at right now. When you look at World War I, not II, I, the lead up to World War I, you have a massive shift in alliances, entangling alliances, nation states, dissolution of monarchies, a complete turnover in worldview. When you look at Queen Victoria's children and how they married into the different royal families, it created a weird system of alliances with peoples who had very little in common other than the fact that their monarchs were cousins and intermarried. Now what we have is the inherited alliances and the inherited treaties from World War II. nigh on 70 years ago. A generation, 2 generations, some would argue. Now we are in a very similar situation. The challenge that we face in this rapid turnover is very similar to what was faced in World War I. And World War I, because of a wide increase in literacy and in political activism subsequent to regular newspapers being delivered to middle class and upper lower middle class peoples, people in the lead up to World War I were less likely to just swallow what they were told. Furthermore, when you have the telegraph and the rapid transmission of information back and forth, these were technological advancements that allowed for rapid decisions being made, for news going back and forth, and basically for decisions being made and being carried out before thought could have caught it in older times. You see this definitely with Germany's role in the lead up to World War I. Now we have the internet, whereas before it was telegraph and newspapers. That information sharing that rapidly changed the dynamics and ultimately led to nations calling for war, nations backing off, different groups being empowered. We are at that place right now. And so I know that this is kind of going around the block a little bit to go next door, but we have to understand how we got here. Because if we just think that we're going to fly by the seat of our pants, and we think that these issues, whether it's with Putin and Russia and like all these rumors going around, this history did not stop and start with Putin. This is very, very long in the making. And history is a cycle of trends, because history is ultimately the recountings of human nature, and human nature has not changed. So what was the winning strategy for people leading up in World War I and World War II? It's always going to be a winning strategy to have some level of control over your food supply, because the 3 ubiquitous experiences throughout human history are what? War, famine, disease. One usually begets the other 2. If you see one on the horizon, expect the other 2 to show up. Now, because of what we faced over the past 2 years with this pandemic, you've already had the disease show up. And why does disease usually beget the other 2? Particularly because disease, especially if it's a disease or a pandemic that involves multiple different countries, that strains infrastructure, as we've seen. It strains economies because of loss of productivity. And because the infrastructure, the economy, and usually the monetary supply is strained, trade shows up being strained later. Trade is the bedrock of good relations between peoples. Good fences make good neighbors. Good trade makes for successful and happy friends. So when disease shows up and destabilizes, it causes a vacuum of power. Nature abhors a vacuum. The Russian government has a long view of history. We, particularly in the United States, are very impatient and incredibly myopic when it comes to history. Our version of history in the United States goes back to the 1600s. Theirs goes back to 600 moving forward, and even before that. So this is a fundamental difference in worldview, and it would be a mistake for us to put upon other people's our own characteristics. Owning your food supply in times of uncertainty, or at least being able to meet your basic needs, that's going to serve you no matter what. War, famine, disease. Because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and because Russia is the energy capital of Europe, these are 2 major commodity groups that human beings have to have. And whenever you have destabilization, you're going to see commodity prices go up. Uncertainty breeds an increase in the staples because people need to know that they've got their basic needs covered. Inflation is already eating us alive here in the United States. So if you know that things are going to cost more and you know that you need them, it would be wise to purchase them now. These are commodities. But also I want to encourage you, when you look at the counterbalance here to war, famine, and disease, what are the commodities associated with each one of those? War, bullets, famine, food, disease, medicine, Band-Aids. So the beans, bullets, and Band-Aids complement war, famine, and disease. If you can meet those basic supplies, you're going to be better suited. Now that's the supply side of the house, the actual material, hard capital side of the house. The intellectual capital the skill sets that you have need to correspond to the commodities and to the supplies that you have. To bullets, you need skills in self-defense. To food, you need to know not only how to cook, but how to prepare and how to store and how to put food by. And then with the Band-Aids, with disease, you need to not only have supplies, but be wise, judicious, know how to use them, know how to assess, know how to take care of your family, because having supplies is not enough, friends. In uncertain times, the people who are the best suited to ride things out are people who have skills, not just stuff, but skills. So let me encourage you in the times moving forward to be wise and judicious with your resources and invest in yourself. Invest in yourself, because no matter where you are in this world or what you have, you're going to be able to take care of yourself if your problem-solving capability is dialed in and honed in. Developing your mind, developing your skills, that is an investment in yourself, and it pays dividends for the future for not only you, but for your family as well. So in the lead up, in the times, the uncertain times that we're in right now, we can't control what individuals do far, far away in governments. We can control our own sphere of influence. We can position ourselves to have better options in the midst of uncertainty, but also we can pray. And the spiritual side of the house is not a weak side of the house. It is the strength. It is the source of nourishment by which every other aspect of our being is fed and governed. Being in prayer, being quiet, listening to what God would have you do. Not just talking, but listening, reflecting, being quiet, that is going to serve you. Also, prayer changes things. Psalms throughout the Psalms are replete with passages and verses reflecting the awesomeness of God and His ability to change on a dime the thoughts of leaders and the state of nations. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. God listens to the cries of His people wherever they are, whichever border that they happen to fall in. He hears the cries of His people. He is not deaf to our concerns. He is merciful and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. If we cry out to Him, regardless of how the future plays out, we know that we're safe in the shelter and the shadow of His wings. I hope it was helpful for y'all today. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you'll subscribe to me here on YouTube, Patriot Nurse. You can also support me on Patreon. Subscribe to our cryptocurrency and PayPal. I have links below. Patreon is where every month for my $5 and above Patreon supporters, I do newsletter production each month. So you guys get a breakdown of how I'm thinking about things. But also, let me encourage you, friends, please come train with me. Even if it's not with me, I want you to get trained and develop your mind and develop your skills. 4 hours online, $129. I have an option if you want to learn with me online. You can't make it in person to class. Next month, I'm going to be teaching in, actually it's at the end of this month, I'm going to be teaching in Jacksonville, Florida, and I have a few spots left for that. I'm also going to Kalispell, Montana, Denver, Colorado, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Phoenix, Arizona, several other places. You can check the full list out at the website, thepatriotnurse.com. Let me tell you, coming to class and training in person, there is precious little to improve upon it, because you're going to meet some of the best people, not only in the country, but frankly in your area. So it's a great networking opportunity to get together with like-minded people who value and are willing to invest in the same things that you're willing to invest in. You really find out a lot about people by where they're willing to spend their time, energy, and money. And where your treasure is, there's your heart also. So that's a quick assessment on whose priorities are where. Great place to meet people, lasting friendships. So I hope it was helpful for y'all. Chag Sameach, for those of you who are celebrating Passover. I am exhausted from cleaning for several days, so we're getting there. But the season of our deliverance, the season of our exodus, may this be the season of your exodus, and whatever your life needs, in whatever area that you need freedom in, may this be your exodus. In whatever area that you need provision in, may you have supernatural provision and abundant favor, abundant, overflowing, overwhelming favor. Be blessed in all you do. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later.